But my beats, they are hard.
Hello and welcome back to the BCSN SportsWrap. Bryan Fulford and AD Drew here. Make sure you interact with us on Twitter at MyBCSN1. Also on Instagram, you can find us at MyBCSN1. Our webpage, www.mybcsn.net. You can interact with us also on the Facebook pages, Black College Sports Network and the BCSN SportsWrap, all on Facebook. You can tag AD Drew. You can find him at BCSN Drew, D-R-E-W, on Twitter. You can find me at DRB365. And now the moment that, many have been waiting on. Now, let's just clarify something. Again, for people who are unfamiliar, we started our polling back going into week 6 of the season. Pretty much it was about October, okay? And we didn't have a preseason poll. You know, we're one of those people, we're that group of people that we like to kind of see. I mean, obviously anybody that puts a preseason poll out is really, you're just trying to get people talking. That's what polls do at the beginning of the year, blah, blah, blah. So we just wanted to wait until after we started and saw how teams played, what they looked like. Okay, and so I'll just say for you, AD, this is what the poll looked like, our very first poll, okay? And we did 2 polls. We did a FCS Division I poll, which we called the D1, and then we did a poll for Division II and NAIA schools called our Under D1. So the very first week 6, heading into week 6, this is after 5 weeks of the year, our poll for Division Under D1 was Bowie State at 1, Virginia Union 2, Miles 3, Kentucky State was 4, and Langston at 5. Okay. For the D1 level, our first poll, North Carolina A&T was 1, Alcorn State 2, Bethune-Cookman 3. South Carolina State was 4, and Arkansas Pine Bluff was 5. All right, so that's where we started. Pretty interesting, huh, AD?
Yeah, a lot of familiar names in that poll compared to our final poll.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting.
On both levels.
On both levels. I think we had the most fun and diversity in the division or under D1 poll. We had some weeks where we lost all 4 teams underneath Bowie. And then we had other weeks where, I think the consistency in the D1 poll was pretty interesting. But I think we had a very strong MEAC conference, and probably 4 of the best teams in Black college football came out of that conference. If you had to say maybe 6 or 7 of the best teams, you'd probably say easily 4 of them came out of the MEAC. So,
and when you give out the final polls, Bryan, compare their final ranking to where their initial ranking was in our poll for the people.
Okay, I will do that. And again, our final, this is the human votes that we have tabulated for our polls. On another show, we will share some interesting analytics that we have put up. There have been some interesting posts by people who have searched for ways of quantifying and qualifying wins and losses, and we've tried to do that a little bit, and you may like or dislike, but again, I'll preface by saying what makes college football great is that there's debate, and the fact that none of our teams get a chance to settle it on the field against one another makes everything subjective. So just remember that as you hear these polls, some people will agree, some people will disagree. But all conversation is good because that's what college football has been founded on. The very first year of the Black College National Championship in 1920 was Howard and Talladega College. Those were the very first two champions, Howard and Talladega. Notice there were two. So with that said, here is our top 5 under D1 poll, final Black college football poll. At number 5, coming in with a record of 8-2 from the CIAA, Virginia State. The Virginia State Trojans were not ranked on our initial poll and actually didn't find a home in our poll until after week number 10. And they've pretty much, which was almost right at the end of the season. I mean, heck, that was right after them beating Virginia Union, matter of fact. So Virginia State, great season this year, coming in at number 5. Number 4, the Langston Lions, coming in with a record of 8-2. As mentioned earlier, they began the year in our poll at number 5. I believe they got as high as, I'm looking through the poll, I think as high as they got was 4. The Lions, of course, missed out on the NAIA playoffs, but they did have a share of the Sooner Athletic Conference Championship. Coming in at number 3 with a record of 7-3, the Savannah State Tigers. Savannah State, Coach Quinn, Savannah State was not ranked in our initial poll after week 5. They entered the poll, though, after week 10. And, of course, that's another team, much like Virginia State, by the time that the dust had settled and you saw who else was out there and you realized the body of work that Savannah State had put out there, it was pretty impressive, including big wins at the end of the year against Albany State and Fort Valley State.
But they also had a should have won against, I believe it was Florida Tech, the game where they went for 2 and lost on the 2-point conversion.
The opening, the game at the beginning of the year. Well, they also blew a game against Charleston Southern, a game that they against an F. Charleston Southern is an F.
That baby game I'm talking about.
Well, no, the game. No. They lost the first game of the year. Technically, Coach Quinn could have gone for the tie and forced overtime, but he chose to go for a 2-point play, and they missed it, and they ended up losing by 1. That was the very first game of the season. Yeah.
So we realistically could be looking at a 9-1 Savannah State team.
Very well could have been a 9-1 season, but still a great season.
And what fun that would have been for our debates if we would have had 2 teams that we were debating that were ineligible for the playoffs and where their final ranking would have been.
Good point. Number 2, the Miles Golden Bears. Miles College finished with a record of 9-3, the SIAC champions, back-to-back champs. Of course, Miles started the poll after week 5 at number 3. They went as high as number 2 after week number 10. Never did enough to really supplant Bowie, who was number 1 above them for, once our poll started. And
it's kind of tough when the team ahead of you is undefeated, though, Bryan.
Right. Yeah, when the team in front of you doesn't really lose, it's kind of tough. And so without further ado, our 2019 top 5 Black college national champion in under D1 is the Bowie State Bulldogs, who finished their season 11-1, regular season 11-0. AD, as the resident Division II aficionado of our organization, how many other D2 teams have finished their regular season unbeaten this decade? I just threw a curveball, so if you don't know the answer, just, it's fine. It's okay.
I believe Winston-Salem is the only one that comes to mind, Bryan, as a team that finished the regular season undefeated.
I thought Virginia State might have done that as well in 2017.
If you keep talking, I will pull it up while we look at it. But the one thing I want to say about Bowie is they were the wire-to-wire number one in our poll, and they are, correct me if I'm wrong, back-to-back champions in our poll, Bryan.
Yes, they definitely probably. I can't. You got me on that one. See, I threw you a curve, and then you just threw me a curve. I didn't even think about looking at last year's poll for our poll.
Going back, looking at the decade, Bryan, I believe Albany State in 10 was 11. Were undefeated in the regular season. Okay. Yes, Albany State was unbeaten at the end of the regular season. Winston-Salem in 11 and 12 were undefeated in regular season.
I'm pretty sure Virginia State was undefeated. I feel like 99% sure.
And Virginia State in 17 was undefeated in regular season. They lost their first game, opening round of the playoffs. All
right, so Bowie State is the fifth school in this decade to finish the regular season. Yeah, in a 10-year decade. And that's pretty impressive. So you can only beat the teams that you're scheduled to play. So save all the extra debate. And obviously, what's interesting is for polls who have all consensus polls, it's always interesting to see how Bowie State is respected or thought of in the mix. One of the polls that we recently ran on Twitter, I'm going to go to the poll as I'm talking right now. I put this out right after the Celebration Bowl. And basically, who should the 2019 Black College National Champion be? And the three teams I listed, North Carolina A&T, FAMU, and Bowie State. Obviously, with the thought that Bowie, even though we do two separate polls, there are some organizations, Box to Row, one of them that does an all-comprehensive poll. And so one of the things that, shout out to Brian Simpkins, who he's been a very good, I think a great voice on Twitter in this conversation, as he's brought up some interesting points that this may be the first year that a team that did not finish with 11 wins sort of those who have the consensus polls will not finish number one in the consensus polls, because I think it's pretty much a strong belief that the MEAC was so strong this year that whoever comes out of the MEAC, let's be honest, FAMU or North Carolina A&T, would finish ahead of Bowie State. So that was that. So any final thoughts on the top five there? We'll have a lot more conversation about this on our next show, but I wanted to give a final word before we move on.
No, that's you pretty much hit it on the head, Bryan.
All right, so let's move forward now. Here we go. The much anticipated, much debated top 5 Division I poll. I'm going to start at number 5. Coming in at number 5, the Southern Jaguars with a record final record of 8-5, 6-1 conference record. They won the SWAC West, having competed for the second consecutive year, having competed in the SWAC championship game. And I think that's fitting. I think that's a fitting spot for Southern, given, hey, look, there's no, they got to the championship game. They beat a good Grambling team. The season started rough. They had tough losses against Florida A&M, a game that they lost in the fourth quarter. They suffered let me see. They had Alcorn State beat at halftime. That was on the road, if I'm not mistaken. They lost that game to Alcorn. They just have not had any luck against Alcorn, so we just gotta preface that for what it is. But they had some good wins. They beat Alabama A&M at the end of of that game. So I mean, it was a good year for Southern, wouldn't you say?
Yes, I would. They had their ups and downs throughout the season. Southern just could not find any type of consistency where they got on the roll and would win multiple games in a row, though, Bryan. That was their biggest downfall this year.
Yeah, for sure. I was looking for, and one of the things for another show, I won't even mention it. We'll just talk a little bit. We'll just keep the focus on the poll here. All right, so moving on to number 4. The number 4 team in our final Division I poll for 2019, the South Carolina State Bulldogs, who finished a record 8-3, 6-2 in the conference. The conference recognized them as co-champions, although they did their 2 conference losses, came to North Carolina A&T, a game that they had a chance to win, and then the A&T really just played a great game, and then they lost to Florida A&M, which at one point they were down by they were at least down by 2 touchdowns, maybe 3, somehow rallied late in the third, fourth quarter, managed to take the lead before eventually losing to FAMU very late in the fourth quarter. They did have a big win over Wofford University to start the year. That was a very good win for them to open the season. And so outside of losing to A&T and A&M, of course, they lost to South Florida in there as well. So that's pretty much South Carolina State with a great season. There'll be some discussion as to whether they were 4, might have even been a little bit higher. I've seen some polls that have had South Carolina State at number 3. But for our poll, South Carolina State finishes number 4. Number 3 in the BCSN Top 5 D1 poll, the Alcorn State Braves, finishing with a record of 9-4, 6-1, SWAC champions, Celebration Bowl runner-up. Again, similar to last year, won the SWAC, lost the Celebration Bowl. And what's interesting is they probably lost a chance at winning. What's the bigger picture is, for the second year, they probably lost a chance at winning the Black College National Championship. We've talked about A&T a lot over the last half of this decade, but really the second best program, and let's just be real, Alcorn State has been just as good of a program the second half of the decade as North Carolina A&T is. The problem is when they play head-to-head, they are now 0-3. And so, we have to call them probably the second best program of the decade. Your thoughts there on Alcorn State?
No, just, it would be nice to see if Alcorn can finally get over that hump. Yeah, definitely. You asked me, and I just remembered this, where these teams were. Southern, who's number 5, they were not in our poll to start the year.
South Carolina State, who finished 4. They started at number 4. Alcorn State, who just finished 3rd, they started at number 2 at the beginning of our polls. And so now we get down to 1 and 2. And I feel like, what's the best way to debut this? Should I just do 2 and then do 1, or do 1 and then, of course, you know who 2 is? What do you prefer here, AD?
Bryan, there's no easy way. You're going to, and I'm trying to stay politically correct. You're going to upset at least 50% of the listeners.
Oh hell, when
you do this.
So we can't be worried about who we upset here. I was just looking for.
You might as well just say, look, the winner. Give all the metrics, give all the whys. And the winner is blank, so everybody knows who number 2 is.
All right.
Don't do a Steve Harvey on me.
Exactly. I'm gonna try not to mess this up. So I will still. Our producer Roy, he was playing. He was like, just do 2. He was like, stop messing around. Okay. So number 2, the number 2 team in our BCSN Top 5 Division I poll, and this was a close vote. And I think these 1 and 2 are so close. And you could go to any number of reasonings why you pick one team 2, why you pick the other team 1. And I just think I'm just going to put it like that. I don't know if there's ever been a vote that has been this close over the past few years, but this one was. And every argument I have heard for or against have been valid ones. So, without further ado, our BCSN number 2 ranked team for 2019 season, the North Carolina A&T Aggies, with an overall record of 9-3, 6-2 conference record, Celebration Bowl champions for the 3rd consecutive year, awarded the MEAC Conference Championship for the 3rd consecutive season. And, the Aggies had some good wins this season, beating Elon to open the season at home. Their win against Charleston Southern was a pretty good win as well. Charleston Southern finished 6-6.
Oh, Bryan, you mulling too long. Everybody already know who you're talking about. Just say it.
I said it. Were you not listening, or did I not come through? I just said it. I was just trying to do the whole setup here. Okay. So anyway, so North Carolina A&T finishes at number 2 in our poll, which means the BCSN 2019 D1 national champion, the Florida A&M Rattlers, with a record of 9-2, 7-1 in the MEAC, finished with the best record in the MEAC conference, and of course, they were imposed a self-imposed ban, which prevented them from participating in the Celebration Bowl, and thus, because of that, the MEAC decided to not recognize them as conference champions, although they beat the 2 teams that were declared quote-unquote co-champions, North Carolina A&T and South Carolina State. They beat both of those teams on the field, and it was that close. It was that close of a vote. There are metrics that we've put together that we will talk about on another show, that on our next show, obviously at the end of the week, that sort of validates, and we did that. We looked at it afterwards, so I want to say that to be clear, that kind of point out. And then, I'm sure there's going to be controversy. I mean, I'm going to go through and just take a look at some other polls as I've seen them that came out and were released this week. The Box to Row poll, which is a comprehensive poll, mind you, listed their coaches poll, had North Carolina A&T 1, FAMU at 2, and A&T got 16 first-place votes. A&M got 3 first-place votes. Number 3 was Alcorn, South Carolina State, and Southern. That was 3, 4, and 5. The media poll on Box to Row, A&T had 14 first-place votes. A&M had 1. A&T came in at number 1. A&T came in at number 1. FAMU came in at number 2. Just a point over South Carolina State, mind you. And then I listened to Dr. Cavill's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Obviously, there were 5 hanging chads or hanging first-place votes that Alcorn State had out there. Apparently, they all went to North Carolina A&T. And so in his final poll, now Dr. Cavill, they do a similar poll like us. They do a D1, and then they do what's called a mid-major for NAIA and D2 schools. So only FCS schools, and in their poll, their voters had A&T 1, FAMU 2. But for us and for our voters, it ended up being FAMU 1, and they were not in the poll. Our very first poll that we had after week 5, Florida A&M was not in that poll. North Carolina A&T was number 1 after week 5. And so, our final poll, again, FAMU 1, North Carolina A&T 2, Alcorn State 3, South Carolina State 4, Southern 5. And that's our final poll, AD. And so the one other thing I want to throw out there, because we did this poll and it kind of works out. As of the time that we are taping this, we have had some great engagement on this poll, but just to let you know, the question was asked, who should be the 29 Black College National Champion? North Carolina A&T was listed first. FAMU was listed second. Bowie State was listed third. It has been overwhelming. The votes have been FAMU with 65%, 65.3% of the votes. North Carolina A&T with 28.8%, and Bowie State at 5.9%. And so that is what the people have, put out there for us. So not that the people's vote counted in our poll, but it seems like there is a large contingent of people who disagree with some of the other media polls. But you know what? I think FAMU and A&T are both deserving. So in the final record of history, when we look back on this 5 to 6 years from now, it should show Florida A&M, and probably it should show North Carolina A&T as Black College National Champions. I mean, it probably should. Don't you think?
All right. I totally agree with that, Brian. They need to FAMU has a claim to the national championship. The A&T has their claim to the national championship. Some people may have bias, some people may look at it independent, but both teams should be recognized. And how many times have we seen before, if you go back and look at some of the listings, there are times on there when you have a team that's listed as Black College National Champion with an asterisk because their national championship was quote-unquote removed afterwards due to vacated victories. So FAMU took the self-initiative of not competing in postseason so that their victories would not have to be vacated later, which should give them a right to have those votes as HBCU national champions.
And the other, one of the biggest arguments that we will hear will be about the postseason ban, which prevented them from playing in the Celebration Bowl. And let's be clear, had the band not existed and all other things been in place, FAMU would have been in the Celebration Bowl, and A&T probably would have gone to the playoffs. I think we talked about that one time. But anyway, I had a text from Mo Carter, who brought up the interesting scenario in 2012 that happened in the FBS level involving Ohio State, an Ohio State team that went 12-0. But because of an NCAA imposed ban, they were not ranked. Even though they finished as the only team in major division football who were unbeaten, they finished number 3 in the AP poll, and I think they weren't even ranked in the coaches poll. But that was the year where Notre Dame was unbeaten following the 2012 Manti Te'o year. 2012, they went into the BCS game against Alabama. And I think this was the beginning of the Alabama dynasty, or maybe they had won the previous year. I'm not really sure. But I just remember Derrick Henry just running all over Notre Dame that year. That was a brutal game. I'm so glad I didn't go to that game, by the way. But anyway, Notre Dame lost that game, finished in number 4 in the polls. Alabama, of course, won. I think number 2 was Oregon, but Ohio State finished 3. So he brought that up, and, a lot of people will bring up stuff like that. But, again, FAMU's ban was not an NCAA mandated ban. Now, FAMU may have put the ban in place to try to avoid what might have come down from the NCAA, but we don't know that. All we know is they decided to sort of slap themselves on the wrist, and they did it again in basketball or whatever, or maybe another sport, baseball, to take themselves and say, we'll take the penalty this year of not competing in any postseason play.
Right. I've got one other instance where this happened, Brian.
Yeah.
And this goes back to 1993, the Auburn Tigers football team. And Terry Bowden was their head coach at this point in time, went undefeated at 11-0 and finished number 4 in the AP polls due to NCAA probation. Now this is due to probation, not a self-imposed ban. Auburn was barred from TV play and postseason play and had a reduction in scholarships. Obviously, because of the postseason ban, Auburn did not play in the SEC championship game and or a bowl game. Auburn was the only major college team to finish the season undefeated, and they were recognized as national champions by the National Champions Foundation, whoever that is. Yep. I don't know who they are, but Auburn University only recognizes the 57 and the 2010 as their official championship teams, although their website does highlight the 1993 team. And that's something that the university decided to do by not focusing in on their 93 team. But until that 2010 championship was won with Cam Newton as the quarterback, many people did recognize the 1993 team as a championship team. Right.
Well, again, the arguments for and against for FAMU, you can always say they finished with the best record in the conference. Everybody in the conference played each other. They finished with a 7-1 record. Everyone else was 6-2 or worse. That means they beat North Carolina A&T and South Carolina State head-to-head. They also had the fewest losses among all FCS teams, and even discounting any games against FBS schools. They finished with 2 losses, which was the lowest. And if you discount if you're one of the people who like to discount playing the FBS teams, then they finished with 1 loss in the FCS. They also had the nation's longest, or the black college football, in FCS, they had the longest winning streak of 9 games. And in the regular season, regular season including championship games, only one other team had 9 wins, and that was Alcorn State. So those are the fours. Obviously, anyone who's against will point to the postseason ban. And I think that's the only argument that anybody who doesn't, other than being a North Carolina A&T fan, the only argument anyone could come to is the self-imposed ban. So
that Aggie pride is very loud, though.
Yes, Aggie pride is loud, and it should be. And you all deserve to be the 3-time Celebration Bowl champs. And if the conference wants to give you
Rattler Nation.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's what makes it great. And just the fact that, Willie Simmons is 2-0 over Sam Washington only makes the 2020 game even that much more exciting to see in Greensboro next year. So, all right. Well, that's our final poll. So we'll post that out, and it'll be interesting to kind of see the back and forth that comes with it. We'll also, in our next show, we'll kind of go through. We'll talk a little bit more about some metrics that we've put together that sort of show you how close these two teams are together. And we'll also talk about programs of the decade, teams of the decade, some of the top performances and top plays of the decade. That's all that I have. I'm going to turn over to you, AD, the last word for this show. So I'm going to give that over to you now.
A couple of things, Bryan, before we get out of here. Number one, this is that time of the year. There are a lot of people who go through depression and other things during this time of the year. I know you retweeted it, and I've seen it on your Facebook about about depression on multiple people's Facebook posts. A lot of people start missing people who have gone on before them during this time of the year. So keep those people in your prayers and get around those people and give them a positive thought and, positive interaction during this time of the year. That's number one. Number two, the family at Tuskegee University, and I can't remember this ever happening to a university, Bryan, major or minor, where they've lost 2 active coaches during one year, not only 1 year, but during one semester, Bryan, as the Tuskegee University tennis coach. Mr. Anthony Grant passed away this past weekend, late last week. And this is the second time that Tuskegee University has lost a coach, an active coach during this year. So thoughts and prayers to the Grant family and to the Tuskegee University family as they go through this through the losses, and those losses are especially tough during this time of the year. So just thoughts and prayers go out to the Grant family and anybody who's lost somebody recently during this time of the year, Bryan.
Well said, AD. Well said. And, of course, so that's going to do it for this show. This will be a great Christmas. This is the kind of podcast where we'll put this out in 3 different parts. I was just talking to producer Roy about that. We'll put it in 3 different parts. So that way, if you get to part 1 and maybe you don't want to listen to part 1, but you want to listen to part 2, and it'll be great. Hey, if you're packing, if you're putting Christmas packages around the tree and doing some late night, packaging and getting stuff ready for Santa, this is a great podcast to listen to tonight. We're glad that you're listening to it. It'll give you something to talk about with some family and friends over Christmas and over the next couple of days. And by the end of the week,
while you're cooking the ham, the chitlins, the turkey, or whatever you eat, go ahead and turn it on. Turn it on.
Yeah.
Make sure you do this before the NBA comes on, though.
Yeah, right. And share it with some people. There'll be a lot of tables with a lot of Aggies and a lot of Rattlers around the Christmas table, and a lot of debating will go on. And share this with somebody. Let somebody. We want to hear from you. Whether you call us crazy or whether you applaud us. We want to hear from you because we love this thing, this Black college football thing. We love Black college athletics. We just love Black colleges. We are products of HBCUs. And so
and Bryan, I'm going to say this. If you're going to call either one of us crazy, please send us our check.
Right. That's AD Drew. You can find him at BCSN Drew, DREW. You can find me at DRB365. And, of course, on Twitter and Instagram at MyBCSN1. The webpage is mybcsn.net, and, of course, on Facebook and Instagram. And we're going to set the internet on fire here when we get ready to post this. And I'm sure it'll be a fun conversation for us all. Hey, remember the reason for the season. We wish you and your family and friends a joyous, happy, and blessed Christmas. And we will talk to you after Santa's done his business and the kids around the tree open the presents and you've given thanks to the Lord above for the birth of his son and bringing him down on this planet for us. And so for my man AD Drew, producer Roy, and all of the folks who help the Black College Sports Network, we wish you a Merry Christmas. We will talk to you definitely end of the week and before the new year. I'm Bryan Fulford. Merry Christmas, everyone, and we will see you soon. Peace out.
I'll holler.
It's like a loop machine. All around town, people trying to get down. It's like a loop machine.
But you stay hard.